So Clemson is joining Florida State in suing the ACC in trying to get out of the grant of rights that expires in 2036. And it's a really intriguing lawsuit because, for the most part, everybody has kind of argued, whether it's the ACC, whether it's the schools, whether it's independent people who have lawyers, whatever the case may be, they've looked at the contract that everybody signed to stay in the ACC and has said, this is pretty airtight. I don't know. I don't think there's a way out of this. And now two different schools have tried to say, well, wait a second. Yes, there is a way out of here. And here's what it is. Now, Florida State has argued essentially that throughout their lawsuit is that our contract with ESPN really only goes through 2028. So why are we locked in through 2036? And that's not a bad argument to make, but I think the consensus will say, like, while that's a argument that you can say, hey, this kind of sucks, it is an argument against, I guess the argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That, like, does this portion of your contract suck? Yes, but you agreed to it. You signed the document that says, hey, while the contract goes through 2028, you're locked in through 2036. Is it a bad provision of the contract? Sure, but you signed it. Sorry. Clemson's argument is not, I don't know what the right word is. Essentially, their argument is the exit fee is really high, and that's bullcrap. Which, again, is one of those, like, hey, that sucks. But you did agree to that. You did say, like, it's the same thing as sort of like, if when a like NFL player holds out for a bigger contract in training camp, and like if you're already under contract and you're like, yeah, but I deserve to be paid more than that. Sure you do, but this pesky thing you signed that legally requires me to only pay you this much, yet you agreed to that too. And that's sort of what Clemson and Florida State are in right now. Now, Clemson is making an argument that Florida State is not. And I find that interesting because you would think that both of those schools would be like, hey, let's see if we can't get on the same page here a little bit and make the same argument. Because if two universities are making the same argument in the conference, one, it puts a little bit of pressure on the conference to say, hey, maybe there is a growing dissent inside the conference. But then also, it kind of packs a little bit more power to your punch if you can say, hey, we both are in agreement that this is what the contract reads to us, and that's why we're suing, rather than Florida State says one thing, Clemson comes back and says, well, actually, what we're saying is a whole different thing. Clemson's argument, Florida State's argument is the contract runs through 2028, so why are we locked in through 2036? Clemson is saying the contract only runs for while we're in the ACC, that our grant of rights, basically our TV money, is only given to the ACC as long as we're in the ACC. And once we leave, that money goes back to me. And I have whatever situation I want to put together, whatever conference I want to join, that's up to me at that point. That's the argument Clemson's making, which is a really interesting one, because if that one is found true, that one opens the floodgates. And it's something I know that we've talked about before, somewhat at length, of if/when this all comes down and strikes down and things get right and perfect and hip, hip, hooray for the ACC members that want out, the conference is toast. Because everybody, it's like when you flip the lights on and the cockroaches start scrambling. And there are schools in that conference that are going to be looking for a home that don't include being in the Big Ten or SEC, because the ACC is going to be in a world of hurt if a judge rules that Clemson, the argument they're making is, I only have to give the ACC my TV money as long as I'm in the ACC, and once I leave, I get to do whatever I damn well please. About 15 minutes after that verdict is reached, Clemson is going to say, hey, by the way, we are moving to the SEC, and other schools are going to start jumping ship as well. Give it about 25 minutes after that verdict comes down, because everybody in the ACC, they're not dumb. They see the writing on the wall. They know that, hey, when you look at the money that the Big Ten and SEC are going to get from their TV deals compared to what we're going to get from our TV deal, we're going to get left behind. We can't afford to get left behind. Therefore, we're going to have to figure something out here. And I would think that it's highly unlikely that ESPN comes back to the bargaining table and tells the ACC, like, hey, you know what? You guys were right. I'm willing to give you more money. After, you've spent millions in legal fees and you've discussed all of this and had to figure out legal strategies and then shared kind of the fact that you hate the home that you've built. I'm willing to come back and give you a little bit extra money so you'll stay with me. I don't imagine that on the horizon. I imagine a scenario where, and I've said this before in the last week, that some triumvirate of Florida State, Stanford, Notre Dame, probably Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia, somewhere in there, all join the Big Ten, where Clemson, Miami, you could probably argue Virginia Tech, join the SEC, whatever the case may be. But there are going to be some Wake Forests and potentially Dukes, Boston Colleges, North Carolina States that might be left kind of on the outskirts looking in, going like, that did not go well for us. So I think the idea that Clemson now is joining the fray of like, we are going to launch a lawsuit against our conference. And make no mistake about it, they're not launching a lawsuit to try to the argument had been that Clemson and Florida State and Miami were kind of, North Carolina to a lesser extent, were kind of leading this charge inside the conference of, hey, we feel like we should get the lion's share of the TV revenue because we're bringing eyeballs, we're bringing success. I don't like that we're splitting the college football playoff revenue evenly between the schools, etc. And you play that card as kind of a precursor to it's the same thing that the SEC and Big Ten do in the college football playoff. If you don't do what we want you to do, if you don't think the same way we do, if you don't want to operate business-wise the way we want you to operate business-wise, we'll take our ball and go home. Because our ball is a much bigger, nicer, extravagant ball than what you have. And so, in that situation, I think you'll see a situation where if Clemson's legal strategy is proven valid and correct, that they're bolting. And I think you'll see like Louisville go to the Big 12. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see how that all shakes out. But there is a definitely a line of demarcation in the ACC of like who's going to stay in the Power 5, Power 4, at that point probably Power 3, and who's not. And I said earlier this week, I imagine that those deals are somewhat probably already worked out, that these schools, like there's a reason that Clemson is so vehemently now trying to change the course of its trajectory in the same vein that Florida State is. The reason that they're trying to do that is because they know they can see what is on the horizon and figure out, okay, how do I get there? Because they're not suing their conference to stay in their conference. Florida State and Clemson are not suing the ACC because they love the current situation, but there's just some few minor tweaks, right? Like it's not the It's not the like America, love it or leave it. Like they're saying like, while it's nice here, it certainly could be better. And maybe it might be better over there where the grass might be greener. And so they're going to try to figure out how to get there. So these are all just elaborate ploys that are going to cost millions and millions of dollars for those two schools to try to bust down the gate for those who want out of the ACC. And I wouldn't be surprised if you'll see a coalition, so to speak, of Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, to try to push through that and leave Pitt and Syracuse and Boston College and Wake Forest and North Carolina State and Louisville behind. I think it's just a matter of when, not if, that goes down, because at some point it's going to become too much of a burden to handle. And when you've got kind of the gasoline already pre-poured for the fire, you're just waiting on somebody to light a match. And whether that's a judge, whether that is a college president, whether that's a TV executive, whoever it is, eventually somebody is going to light that match. And it's going to go up in flames. And we'll talk about it then, too. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening to the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. See you tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.